On the night my dad, Gerald Harper, celebrated his 70th birthday, he lifted his champagne flute high with a broad grin and deliberately avoided looking my way. "She deserves absolutely nothing," he proclaimed, his voice flat and dismissive. "Haha, a total nobody. She never even tried to build a career." The room erupted in laughter. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Tears pricked behind my eyes, but I kept my expression steady as Dad turned his back to me and faced my brother Matthew, announcing his birthday gift, a $1 million villa in Monterey. Applause thundered. My mother Evelyn nodded approvingly, and my sister-in-law Sophia clapped her hands until they stung. No one whispered my name. Matthew leaned toward me, his voice syrupy with fake pity. "Don't look so crushed, Lila," he murmured with a smirk. "Dad's right about the business. But don't worry, I've already talked to him. Once I take over, I'll find a small desk for you in the back office. We won't let you starve, even if you are a disappointment." He patted my shoulder as if I were a stray dog before turning back to toast his villa. His laughter, haha, mingled with everyone else's while I stood frozen, waiting for the right moment to leave. The banquet hall dazzled. Crystal chandeliers sparkled over starched white tablecloths, and servers in crisp black vests moved silently between guests. I had arrived early, not as a guest of honor but as a helper, expected to coordinate details and stay invisible. My mother called 3 days earlier, reminding me to check on caterers and flowers. She never asked if I wanted to come. The guest list was full of Dad's business partners, golf buddies, neighbors from their gated community, and relatives I only saw at funerals or milestone birthdays. Most of them didn't know me. As I drifted through the room before the speeches, I overheard, "Gerald's younger daughter? I thought she lived out of state. Does she even work?" I didn't correct them. I'd learned long ago that my presence at family gatherings was tolerated rather than welcomed. My role was to fill empty space in the family portrait and disappear once the camera stopped clicking. Matthew and Sophia stood near the front, looking like models from a magazine. Matthew's tailored navy suit fit impeccably, and Sophia's dress whispered quiet money. They greeted everyone with polished smiles, receiving hugs and handshakes. No one approached me with that enthusiasm. One woman asked where the restrooms were. Another mistook me for an event coordinator and inquired about dessert. I quietly showed them the way. When Dad announced the villa, I was standing at the back wall, close enough to hear every word, yet far enough to remain unseen. He waited until champagne had loosened tongues. "I've been blessed with a wonderful wife, a successful son, and a beautiful daughter-in-law who's given us 2 perfect grandchildren," he proclaimed, voice booming. "Our family isn't perfect, but we've built something I'm proud of. And tonight, I want to announce something truly special." He pulled a set of keys from his jacket. "Matthew, Sophia, here are the keys to your new villa. For bedrooms, a pool, ocean views. Haha, you've earned it." Applause erupted. Sophia covered her mouth in pretend surprise. Matthew hugged Dad warmly. My mother wiped away a tear. I stood frozen, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. No one did. During the applause, someone asked Dad a question I couldn't hear. His response echoed across the room. "Lila? She deserves nothing. A nobody. She never built a career like Matthew. She never understood what it takes to succeed in this family." More laughter followed. A few sympathetic glances flitted my way, quickly averted. My mother didn't flinch. Sophia clapped louder. I felt my stomach twist. As I made my way toward the door, ready to vanish, it swung open. A man I didn't recognize stepped inside, older, silver-haired, dressed in an expensive yet understated suit. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to rooms full of power. He scanned the crowd and then looked directly at me. "Excuse me," he said, voice low but clear. "Are you Lila Harper?" The laughter died instantly. "I'm Henry Collins, senior editor with Business Ledger. I apologize for interrupting your family celebration, but I need to speak with you urgently." That was the moment my father's carefully orchestrated party became the stage for a story I never imagined telling. Have you ever felt invisible around the people who should value you most? Drop a comment or a heart if this resonates. You're not alone. Who is Henry Collins, and why did fear flash across my father's face? Part 2 reveals what happened next. Henry's interruption felt like a stone dropping into a still pond. The room's conversations faltered. My father, still clutching the villa keys, stared at the stranger with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Genuine fear. Whispers rippled through the hall. Henry excused himself to take a call, promising to return in a few minutes. His absence left me alone in a room full of people who had spent the last 3 hours ignoring me. Dad's posture shifted. The confident patriarch who had just handed out $1 million gift now sat slightly hunched, eyes darting toward the door. Mom leaned in to whisper something. He shook his head sharply, silencing her. Matthew and Sophia's smiles stiffened. They kept glancing toward the exit, as if waiting for bad news. The celebration continued, but something fundamental had changed. An editor from a financial magazine asking for the daughter, who'd just been dismissed, didn't fit the story my family liked to tell. Guests snuck glances at me, debating whether I had suddenly become someone worth knowing. Their curiosity stung almost as much as their earlier indifference. Standing there, I remembered childhood. Matthew, 4 years older, hit every milestone first. He walked first, talked first, went to school first. By the time I reached each milestone, the celebration was over. When he joined the football team, his trophies went on the mantle. When I joined the debate club and won regionals, my ribbons collected dust in my room. When he was accepted to Dad's alma mater, he got a new car. When I earned a full scholarship across the country, I got a handshake and a polite "good luck, sweetheart." The laughter at my expense now echoed years of dismissal. Another hour crawled by. I watched my family perform their parts with the precision of actors. Dad held court, dispensing advice and accepting tributes. Mom glided around ensuring everyone felt welcome. Matthew and Sophia posed for photos with the villa keys, smiles never wavering. No one invited me into any ritual. At one point, Mom approached, face tight. "Lila, the caterers need someone to check dessert. Could you handle it? You're not doing anything else." She didn't ask, she commanded. I nodded and went to the kitchen. The catering staff looked startled when I walked in. Guests weren't supposed to be back there. I assured them I was just checking on things. They relaxed, assuming I was a coordinator. The head caterer, Maria, worked with efficient grace. Her team plated miniature cheesecakes and chocolate mousse. The kitchen's hum soothed me. It was the only place that night where I didn't feel out of place. Back in the hall, Dad chatted with business associates. They praised his generosity and Matthew's achievements. "You must be proud," one man said, raising his glass. "Matthew's really made something of himself." Dad's chest swelled. "He has my work ethic, same drive," he boasted. "You can see it in everything he does." The man glanced around and spotted me. "And your daughter? What does she do?" Dad's expression flickered before settling into a mix of dismissal and disappointment. "Lila? She's still figuring things out," he chuckled. "Always been more of a dreamer than a doer, if you know what I mean." The men nodded sympathetically, as if my supposed failure was a tragedy they all understood. Then their talk returned to golf handicaps and stock portfolios. I wandered to the windows overlooking the parking lot, watching the winter night settle over gleaming cars. Mom found me. "Lila, why are you standing alone? People will think something's wrong," she chided. I kept my gaze on the glass. "People don't think about me at all," I said softly. She sighed, heavy with years of frustration. "Don't start tonight. Your father's celebration isn't the time for self-pity." I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I'm stating a fact. No one here cares whether I'm here or not. That's not true. We invited you, didn't we? You invited me to check on the caterers and make sure the flowers looked right. That's not the same as wanting me here. Her jaw tightened. We have limited resources. We can't give everything equally. Matthew has a family to support. He needs the villa more than you do. I didn't ask for a villa. Then what's the problem? She snapped. I didn't answer. She left to greet someone more important. Stories of the villa were already morphing into legend. I overheard variations. In one, Matthew earned it through years of work. In another, Dad planned it for months. In every version, the villa proved that loyalty paid off. No one mentioned Dad's biting words about me. A well-preserved woman with a smooth face and carefully maintained smile approached. "You must be Lila," she said, positioning herself beside me as if we were friends. "Your father mentioned you in his speech." I nodded. "It must be difficult," she murmured conspiratorially, leaning closer. "Having a brother like Matthew. He's achieved so much. Hard to live up to, aw." I shook my head. "I'm not trying to live up to him." She laughed, a tinkling, artificial sound. "Of course not, dear. Everyone finds their own path. Some paths are just longer than others." She patted my arm with condescending sympathy and floated off. I watched her go, feeling weighed and found wanting by someone who knew nothing about me. Sophia made her way over next, moving gracefully in expensive shoes. Her smile stayed fixed, a mask she couldn't quite remove. "Lila," she said, standing close enough that I could smell her heavy floral perfume. "Don't take what your father said too personally. You know how he gets when he's had a few drinks." I laughed without humor. "He wasn't drunk." Her smile faltered. "Well, he gets carried away sometimes." The villa was a surprise to us too. We had no idea he'd be so generous. I met her eyes. "You knew about the villa 3 weeks ago. Matthew mentioned it when you came to pick up the kids from my apartment." Her expression cracked. "That was different," she protested. "We knew he was considering it. We didn't know he'd announce it tonight." "Does the timing matter?" "Look, I'm trying to be nice," she hissed. "I know things haven't been easy for you, but that's not our fault. Matthew worked hard for what he has. Maybe if you'd made different choices." "Different choices?" I echoed. "Yes, career choices. Life choices. You can't blame us for the fact that you haven't figured out what you want to do." I didn't correct her. I simply looked at her until she excused herself. I retreated to the coat check. The attendant, a college student, looked up. "Can I help you find something?" "No, thanks," I said. "I just need a minute." She nodded and returned to her phone, giving me space to breathe. I reminded myself that the night would end and my life would resume. When I returned to the hall, Henry Collins was back. He stood near the entrance, scanning the crowd. Our eyes met. He began walking toward me, expression unreadable. People watched him approach. Curiosity crackled. Dad noticed too. He left his table, moving toward us with forced casualness. "Everything all right here?" he asked, directing his question to Henry. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Gerald Harper." Henry shook his hand. "Henry Collins, Business Ledger." Dad's smile tightened. "I wasn't aware anyone from the press had been invited." "I wasn't invited, Mr. Harper. I'm here on business." "Business? What kind of business brings Business Ledger to my birthday?" Dad asked. Henry's gaze flickered to me. "Business with your daughter." The words dropped like a bomb. Dad's confusion deepened. "Lila." He laughed, a brittle ha-ha. "There must be some mistake. Lila doesn't have dealings with the press." "No mistake," Henry said. "I've been investigating a sudden shift in the city's commercial landscape. My research led me here. I need your daughter to confirm a few things before our lead story goes to print at midnight. It's a matter that could redefine your family's name." Dad's face hardened. He didn't see opportunity. He saw risk. "What has she done now? If she's in legal trouble, I won't let it ruin my reputation." "Lila, explain yourself and then leave." Matthew appeared, alarmed. "What's going on?" he asked, protective hand on Dad's arm. "Mr. Collins claims he has business with your sister," Dad explained. "We think it's a misunderstanding." Matthew looked at me, face strained. "Lila, what is this about?" "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "Mr. Collins hasn't told me." "Then maybe ask him to leave." "This is Dad's party, not some business meeting," Matthew snapped. Henry remained calm. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't urgent," he said. "We're publishing tomorrow morning. I need to speak with Miss Harper before it prints." A story about what? Mom demanded. That's confidential until Miss Harper and I speak, Henry replied. The standoff stretched. Guests leaned closer to hear. The string quartet played on, waltz swelling behind us. There's a small conference room down the hall, I said. We can talk there. Dad grabbed my arm. Not roughly, but firmly. Lila, you don't have to do this. We don't know who this man really is. He's shown me his credentials, I said, gently removing his hand. And I'd rather hear whatever he has to say in private. We should come with you, Matthew insisted. No, the word surprised us all. I'd rarely refused my father outright. His eyes widened. In the stunned silence, I walked away. Henry followed. Thank you, he whispered as we left. This will be easier without an audience. I didn't reply. We were too aware of the eyes following us. The conference room was utilitarian, fluorescent lights buzzing above mismatched chairs. Henry closed the door. I remained standing. Say what you came to say, I told him. He pulled out a leather portfolio. We've been researching anonymous investors who've built huge real estate portfolios. Our search led us to a holding company called Harbor Estates. Are you familiar with it? My heart pounded. I said nothing. Many of our subjects prefer anonymity, he continued. But the story goes to print tomorrow. We wanted to give you a chance to comment. What do you want from me? Confirmation. And, if you're willing, a quote. And if I refuse? We'll publish with our documentation. We have property deeds, corporate filings, financial statements. He laid out the papers. The pages were filled with my choices and my work, everything I'd built while my family looked elsewhere. If your life were being rewritten by an unexpected revelation like this, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could help someone else. Henry's documents threatened to change everything. What secrets was I hiding, and how would my family react? Part 3 will reveal what the papers proved. Fluorescent lights hummed as Henry's papers spread across the scratch table. Corporate records, property deeds, financial statements, all pointed to Harbor Estates. They weren't just numbers. They were the blueprint of a life I'd lived in secret. We tried to reach you through normal channels, Henry said quietly. Your representatives declined. When we learned of this party, we made one last attempt before we go to print at midnight. My fingers hovered over the documents. What do you want from me? I whispered. Just confirmation, he replied. And if you'd like, a comment. And if I refuse? We'll publish based on these records, he said. Before I could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. The door burst open. Dad stormed in, followed by Mom and Matthew. Their faces were masks of fear and anger. What is going on? Dad demanded. This man won't tell us anything. What does the press want with you? He came to verify information for an article, I said. What article? What information? Dad barked. About my work, I answered. Dad laughed, a harsh, disbelieving ha-ha. Your work? What work, Lila? Whatever you've told him, you need to set it straight. You don't have anything the business ledger would want. Henry stepped forward. Mr. Harper, with respect, I've done extensive research. I know exactly who your daughter is. She's nobody. Dad spat. She has nothing. I've been supporting her for years while she figures herself out. Have you? Henry asked softly. The question hung in the air. Dad's bravado faltered. She lived in modest apartments. She drove used cars. She's never shown any signs of success, he stammered. Henry looked at me for permission. I nodded. He turned to Dad. Appearances can be deceiving. While you were rewarding your son with villas, your daughter was quietly building a real estate portfolio worth more than most Fortune 500 executives will accumulate in their lifetimes. Ms. Harper is the sole owner of Harbor Estates, with assets valued at roughly $1.2 billion. Silence. Dad's mouth opened, then shut. Mom froze, hand mid-gesture. Matthew stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. There was disbelief and a flicker of fear. That's impossible, Dad managed. Henry gestured to the papers. Here are the records. Corporate filings, property deeds, statements. Your daughter owns it all. Dad grabbed a document with trembling hands. He scanned the numbers. He looked up at me, shock etched across his face. Lila, how? He whispered. I didn't answer. Henry cleared his throat. I need your decision. We're running out of time. I took a deep breath. My family stared as if waiting for me to fix a mess I hadn't created. Publish the story, I said finally. No comment. The documents speak for themselves. No, Dad cried, but Henry had already snapped his portfolio shut. Thank you, Miss Harper, he said. And congratulations. He left. The door clicked shut. Dad collapsed into a chair, eyes glued to the documents. Mom's tears ran silently, whether from shock or shame. I couldn't tell. Matthew stood by the door, hands limp. Sophia appeared, face pale. How long have you been hiding this? She whispered. I haven't hidden anything, I replied. I've been living my life. You weren't paying attention. You let us think you were struggling, she accused. You let us believe you needed us. I laughed, a short, bitter ha-ha. I never asked for help. You assumed I needed it because it made you feel better. Dad found his voice. This doesn't make sense. You built a billion-dollar business without support? How? The same way anyone builds anything, I said. One decision at a time. But the money, he sputtered. Where did it come from? I never gave you anything beyond pocket change. That truth hurt more than his insults. Matthew stepped forward, anger and confusion mingling. We didn't know, he insisted. How could we? When should I have told you? I asked. At Thanksgiving, when Dad compared my apartment to your vacation home. At Christmas, when Mom announced I was still finding myself at 32. At every family gathering where you talked about your promotions while no one asked about me. Matthew's mouth opened and closed. He had no answer. I stopped telling you because you stopped listening, I said quietly. You decided who I was when I was 12 and never changed your mind. Henry returned to the doorway with a small recorder. Ms. Harper, time's almost up. Any comment? He placed the recorder on the table, its silver casing gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Dad gripped the chair back until his knuckles whitened. Mom clutched her necklace. Matthew stood frozen. No comment, I said. Henry nodded, picked up the recorder, and left. The door closed behind him. The silence that followed felt heavy and permanent. A clock ticked loudly. Lila, Dad whispered, the sound like a plea. 5 years, I answered before he finished. I've been a billionaire for 5 years. He flinched. I didn't know, he said. You didn't want to know, I replied. There's a difference. I walked out. No one stopped me. Back in the ballroom, guests sensed something had shifted. Conversations quieted as I passed. Some people avoided my gaze. Others tracked me with wide eyes. Dad and Matthew returned a few minutes later, faces stiff. Dad attempted an impromptu toast. To family and loyalty, he declared, voice shaking. Few people lifted their glasses. The words felt hollow. Matthew approached me as the party wound down. We need to talk, he said. We're talking, I replied. Really talk, he pleaded. About how you did this. It makes perfect sense, I said. You weren't paying attention. That's not fair, he protested. When is the last time you asked about my work? I shot back. He said nothing. I'm leaving, I announced. My assistant will contact you regarding the article. His eyes widened. You have an assistant? I have a staff, a company, a life you've never asked about. I picked up my purse. Tomorrow, everyone at this party will know the truth. Deal with it however you like. Don't expect me to help clean up your mess. I walked away. No one dared stop me. My heels clicked on marble as I left the place that had never been home. If you've ever longed to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, leave a heart in the comments and share your story. Your voice matters. By dawn, everyone would know what my family couldn't see. How would they cope when the world recognized what they had ignored? Part 4 explores the fallout. The Business Ledger article went live at 6 the next morning. The headline blazed, anonymous real estate mogul revealed, the billionaire who lived in plain sight. By 7, my phone lit up with hundreds of messages. By 8, news anchors dissected my life. I watched from the living room of my real home, a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was the same city my family had used as proof of my failure when they visited my modest apartment once a year to pick up their grandchildren's gifts. Commentators marveled at the scale of my portfolio and the disconnect between the public persona of the aimless daughter and the actual wealth I'd built. My phone rang incessantly. Mom, Dad, Matthew. I let each call go to voicemail. Mom's messages cracked at the edges. Lila, we need to talk. People are calling. Your father doesn't know what to tell them. Please just talk to us, she begged. Dad's voicemail brimmed with indignation. This is ridiculous. You can't just drop a bomb like this and disappear. We're your family. We deserve an explanation. I turned off my phone. News programs replayed footage of Dad calling me a nobody while awarding Matthew a villa. They highlighted that his net worth, estimated at $30 million, was less than 3% of mine. They interviewed tenants and contractors who praised my fairness and integrity. They contrasted those stories with my family's behavior. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. By Monday, Dad's business associates stopped calling. Golf games were rescheduled indefinitely. Dinner invitations evaporated. People who had laughed at Dad's jokes became suddenly unavailable. Tuesday, Matthew called. Curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Lila, we need to talk, he said, voice rough from lack of sleep. Talk, I replied. Not on the phone. Can I come over? To my apartment? The one you've mocked for years. Silence. What do you want? I asked. I want to understand. How did this happen? How did you do this without us knowing? I laughed softly. Because you never asked. Because you were too busy being the golden son to notice your sister was building something bigger than your entire career. You needed me to be a failure so you could feel like a success. He sputtered. I'm not trying to compete with you. You're trying to make sense of how you missed something so big, I said. If I could hide $1 billion enterprise from you, what else didn't you see? He was silent. Father's having a hard time, he said eventually. People are calling about you. He doesn't know what to tell them. He's embarrassed. I laughed, haha, with no humor. He should be. He called me a nobody in front of 100 people. Now those people know I'm worth 40 times what he is. He should have been embarrassed years ago. I ended the call. The week that followed was surreal. The media cycle moved on, but my parents' world contracted. Friends politely declined dinner invitations. Dad's golf partners cited scheduling conflicts. Mom's book club met without her. They didn't want to discuss the article in front of her. Matthew's role at the family business became awkward. Employees who once deferred to him now looked at him with pity. Sophia stopped attending social gatherings. Her friends couldn't decide whether to ignore or address the situation. The broader social network my parents had cultivated, the charity boards, the gala invites, the dinner parties, quietly shrank. People were polite but distant. Their polite neutrality said more than words. 2 weeks after the article, Dad's assistant called my office to request a meeting on family matters of mutual importance. The language was formal, as if Dad were approaching a business associate. I declined through my own assistant. We had nothing to discuss. Any necessary communication could be handled through appropriate channels. That weekend, a knock sounded at the door of the modest apartment I still used for mail. I opened it to Mom. She looked older than she had at the party. Her makeup and hair were perfect, but something in her posture suggested she wasn't sure she deserved to be there. Can I come in? She asked quietly. For a few minutes. I let her in. She looked around at the simple furniture as if seeing it for the first time. The space she'd once used as evidence of my supposed failure now seemed like a deliberate choice by someone who could live anywhere. Lila, I don't know what to say, she began. Then don't, I replied. She perched on the edge of the couch. Your father is devastated, she whispered. His pride is hurt. That's not the same thing, I said. Tears filled her eyes. He never meant for things to be this way, she insisted. What way? This distance. She sighed. He always hoped you'd find your path. I found my path 20 years ago, I replied. He just wasn't looking. She nodded. We were wrong. I see that now. I sat across from her. What do you want? I asked. I want to understand why you never told us. Because you never asked. Because every time I tried, you changed the subject to Matthew. Because the story you wanted didn't include a successful daughter, I said. She wiped her tears. Can we fix this? Start over? I don't know, I said honestly. But today isn't the day to try. She nodded. When she left, she didn't hug me or ask when we'd talk again. She simply walked to her car. Nothing had been taken from them directly, but everything that mattered had quietly moved on. A family meeting was held the following week. I didn't attend, but I heard about it from people who now couldn't wait to share details. It took place in my parents' formal living room, the one reserved for important moments. Dad sat in his leather chair near the fireplace, Mom on the sofa, Matthew and Sophia opposite. Dad opened with a speech about loyalty, discretion, and presenting a united front. He talked about managing the narrative, as if he were running a company rather than facing his children. He spoke of me as a problem to solve rather than a person. He spoke for 10 minutes. When he finished, Matthew asked, "What do we tell people?" Dad had no answer. He had expected them to follow his lead. His authority was gone. Mom suggested spinning the situation as a happy surprise. "We can say we knew all along and were respecting her privacy," she proposed. "We can tell people your toast was a joke gone wrong." Sophia shot that down. Too many witnesses heard his words. Any attempt to rewrite history would fail. The discussion devolved. Dad blamed Matthew for not knowing about my success. Matthew blamed Dad for his public comments. Sophia claimed she'd always suspected something and blamed them both for ignoring her. Mom begged them to stop fighting. But working together required a leader, and Dad's leadership had been undermined beyond repair. The meeting ended without a plan. The cracks that had always existed in the Harper family were now visible to everyone. Their carefully curated hierarchy collapsed under its own contradictions. Have you seen people who underestimated you scramble to make excuses? How did it feel when they realized they were wrong? Share your experiences below. The charity gala invitation arrived next, an event my family always attended to bask in admiration. What happens when they're turned away while I'm invited to speak? Find out in the final part. 3 weeks after the article, the city's biggest charity gala approached, the kind of black tie event my family attended every year. My invitation arrived addressed to Harbor Estates. They wanted me not just to attend, but to give a keynote address. I accepted. Meanwhile, my parents, accustomed to sitting at the best table, received a polite note. Due to unexpected demand, their tickets would be refunded and they'd be considered next year. No one said outright that they were being uninvited. They didn't have to. On the night of the gala, I arrived in a simple black gown that whispered elegance. My security team coordinated with the organizers, and I entered smoothly. Conversations paused when I walked in. People who'd ignored me for years suddenly found reasons to approach. They congratulated me, introduced themselves, and offered business cards. I smiled, shook hands, and listened. Near the entrance, I spotted my family engaged in a tense conversation with an event coordinator. Dad's jaw clenched as he tried to argue their way inside. Mom's smile was brittle, stuck in social performance mode. Matthew hung back, clearly uncomfortable. Sophia had apparently chosen not to come. I didn't need to say a word. In our world, power has its own gravity. The moment my name appeared on the program, my father's status evaporated. The coordinator didn't bar them because I told her to. She did it because, in the eyes of the elite, a man who couldn't recognize a titan under his own roof was a liability. To align with him meant admitting you were as blind as he'd been. Our eyes met across the lobby. Dad, Mom, Matthew, all finally recognized me. I didn't approach. I didn't wave. I simply turned toward the ballroom. Later, when I stood under glittering chandeliers and delivered my speech, I talked about affordable housing and the importance of giving families stability. I spoke about patience, fairness, and integrity. I didn't mention my family, the article, or the birthday party. The applause felt genuine because it celebrated values rather than scandal. Afterward, I slipped out through a side exit to avoid the crowd. As the car carried me home, a realization washed over me. Nothing about my actual life had changed. The properties still generated income. The investments still grew. My team executed strategies. The only difference was that others now saw what I had always known. Their recognition added nothing to my life. It simply forced them to confront their blindness. The next morning, I watched the sun rise over the skyline from my kitchen. News programs aired clips of the gala. They showed me speaking about housing and juxtaposed those images with footage of my father trying to get in. Commentators called it poetic justice. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. Later that day, my assistant forwarded a formal letter from Dad, printed on his company letterhead. He requested a meeting to discuss family matters of mutual importance. The letter lacked his usual arrogance. He was asking, not commanding. I read it once and fed it into the shredder. It wasn't revenge, it was housekeeping. My silence wasn't a weapon, it was a boundary they would never cross again. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Your voices make this community stronger, and I can't wait to hear them. Messages from neighbors and acquaintances continued to arrive. People who had ignored me now offered congratulations and curiosity. I answered none of them. My property managers called with maintenance updates. Tenants paid rent. Contractors sent reports. Life continued. At some point, I turned my phone back on and scrolled through old voicemails. One woman who had laughed at Dad's toast simply said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." I smiled, not because I needed her apology, but because she'd recognized her mistake. That was more than my own family had done. As months passed, the initial shock faded. My family retreated from public view. Their social standing had rested on assumptions that no longer held. They discovered that polite neutrality can be a cold weapon. I heard whispers that Dad had scaled back his involvement in the business. Employees looked at Matthew with pity rather than admiration. Mom withdrew from social events. They discovered that nothing had been taken from them directly, but everything that mattered, respect, status, control, had quietly moved on. Meanwhile, I invested in more affordable housing, funded scholarships, and mentored young women. I refused to disappear now that I no longer had to hide. I existed on my own terms. Looking back, my family had called me nothing for 30 years. They measured me by their standards and found me wanting. They laughed at my small apartment, unaware I chose it. They patted my shoulder with pity while I quietly bought the building. They offered me an administrative desk and a monthly allowance while I was negotiating deals they couldn't dream of. They needed me to be a failure because it made their narrative tidy. I let them believe it until the truth could no longer be ignored. Now I understand. Nothing was something they no longer controlled. My life isn't a secret, it's a choice. They wanted me invisible. Now I'm not. And that's the end of this chapter of my story. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't defined by those who overlook you. It's defined by you.